The spirit that knows spirit is consciousness of itself and is present to itself in objective form. It is, and is at the same time being that is for itself. It is for itself. It is the aspect of self-consciousness, and that too in contrast to the aspect of its consciousness, or the relating of itself to itself as object. In its consciousness, there is antithesis, and in consequence, the specific character of the shape in which it appears to itself and knows itself. It is solely with this that we are concerned in this treatment of religion, for we have already considered its unembodied essence or its pure notion. But at the same time, the difference of consciousness and self-consciousness falls within the latter. The shape of religion contains not the existence of spirit as nature that is free from thought, nor as a thought that is free from existence, but it is an existence that is preserved in thinking, and also something thought that is objectively present to it. It is in accordance with the specific character of this shape in which spirit knows itself that one religion is distinguished from another. But we have at the same time to note that the exposition of this knowledge of itself within the framework of this single specific character does not, in fact, exhaust the totality of an actual religion. The series of different religions, which will come to view, just as much sets forth again only the different aspects of a single religion, and moreover of every single religion, and the ideas which seem to distinguish one actual religion from another occur in each one. At the same time, however, the difference must also be viewed as a difference of religion. For since spirit lives in the difference of its consciousness and its self-consciousness, the aim of the movement is to supersede this cardinal distinction and to give the form of self-consciousness to the shape that is the object of consciousness. But this difference is not superseded simply by the fact that the shapes contained by self-consciousness have within them the moment of self, and that God is thought of as self-consciousness. The self that is thought of is not the actual self. In order that the self, like any other more precise determination of shape, may in truth belong to this shape, it must, on the one hand, be posited in the shape by the act of self-consciousness, and on the other hand, the lower determination must show itself to be reduced to a moment of the higher and to be comprehended by it. For what is thought of ceases to be something merely thought of, something alien to the self's knowledge, only when the self has produced it, and therefore beholds the determination of the object as its own, consequently beholds itself in the object. Through this activity, the lower determination has at the same time vanished, for the act is the negative that is realized at the expense of something else. Insofar as the lower determination is still present, it is retreated into an unessential aspect, just as, on the other hand, where the lower is still dominant but the higher is also present, the one determination devoid of self has its place alongside the other. Accordingly, if the various ideas within a particular religion do indeed exhibit the entire movement of its shapes, the character of each idea is determined by the particular unity of consciousness and self-consciousness in that religion. That is, by the fact that self-consciousness embraces within itself the determination of the object of consciousness. By its act has completely appropriated it and knows it as the essential determination in face of the other. The truth of the belief in a determination of the religious spirit is revealed in the fact that the constitution of the actual spirit is similar to that of the shape in which spirit beholds itself in the religion as, for example, the incarnation of God, which occurs in Oriental religion, has no truth because the actual spirit of that religion is without this reconciliation. It is inappropriate here to return from the totality of determinations to the individual ones and to show in which shape within the totality and its particular religion the others are contained in their completeness. The higher form being placed under a lower has lost its significance for self-consciousness, belongs to it only superficially, and to its picture thought. It is to be considered in its proper significance only where it is the principle of this particular religion and is upheld by its actual spirit. Paragraph 684 is a long paragraph. There's a lot going on in there. It is also the introductory paragraph to this entire section, natural religion. So we should expect that there's, a good bit of discussion about what natural religion, or religion oriented towards things that are found in nature, is going to consist in. And we do get that. And in addition to that, it's not the cherry on top, but really it's the meat that goes before the dessert. We get these incredibly important clarifications about what Hegel is studying in carrying out this phenomenological investigation of religion and religions. So there's a lot to be said, and we're going to go through quite a few of these things, but we should also look at the structure of this section. So we have this very long paragraph in which there's a whole bunch of things going on. We'll see how well we can summarize all of it. And then we have this short section, and they're all actually short sections in this part, God as light. Okay, so light is a natural phenomenon. It's a natural thing. It's not just that people are like, oh, wow, there's light or there's the sun. Let's worship that because we don't know any better. We have these very crude conceptions of things. No, there's certain aspects of these natural matters that people are engaging with that are well worth drawing out, and Hegel is doing that. And then we have another very short section, plant and animal, right, where we're looking at how, animism, totemism, how these things could come in. And then we have the artificer, spirit as artificer. And that's a bit of a longer section, which is going to lead us up to the point of religion in the form of art, right? Kunstliche Religion, artistic or creative religion. And so in this section, Hegel is leading us into what natural religion is going to be. Remember, natural religion corresponds to consciousness of an object, the object being things of nature. And he begins by talking about all sorts of interesting aspects and then saying, we're not going to be all that concerned with these at this point, but that's where we're going. So let's talk about those. He begins by saying, the spirit that knows spirit is consciousness of itself and is present to itself in objective form. Right, so spirit that knows itself, that's what we've been talking about as the religion section. It is and is at the same time being that is for itself. So already we've got something put on the plate that's a little bit different than what we might expect in talking about natural religion, especially from the last paragraph. We're dealing with spirit that is not only in itself, but is also for itself. It realizes itself as an agent, if not necessarily a subject, orienting itself in relation to the religious object, to God, the divine. So he says, it is for itself, it is the aspect of self-consciousness. And that too, in contrast to the aspect of its consciousness, or of the relating of itself to itself as object. And again, we see what was talked about in 2 paragraphs earlier. Self-consciousness, which is usually self-consciousness in relation to another self-consciousness, is self-consciousness in relation to itself, reflexive. We also have the, objectivity or being present as an object for consciousness. And you could say, well, where does religion come in here? He says, in its consciousness, there is an antithesis. Hegel doesn't use the term antithesis here. It's entgegen, gesetzt, right? And in consequence to the specific, now here we get to what we really want to talk about. In consequence, the specific character of the shape in which it appears to itself and knows itself. So, specific character, right, of shape. Bestimmtheit der Gestalt, the determination, the way in which it presents itself. And it's interesting here, because a Gestalt is already bestimmt, right, in the sense of being this gestalt and not that gestalt. This shape, not that shape, or form. Sometimes Miller translates it as. And he goes on and he says, it's solely with this that we're concerned with in this treatment of religion. And then you might say, well, then why the hell did you talk about all that other stuff leading up to it? And, Hegel is Hegel. He's going to lead you where he's going to go, and sometimes he adds in some things that, strictly speaking, aren't absolutely necessary for the reader at that point, but could be helpful in some way. It gives you an idea of where we're going with this, right? So, but this is where the real action is, the specific character of the shape through which spirit appears to itself and knows itself. So this is, quite important. This is the for itself that we were just talking about. And he goes on and he says, we've already considered religion's unembodied essence or its pure notion. That was a couple paragraphs before. But at the same time, he says, the difference of consciousness and self-consciousness falls within the latter. What's the latter? The pure notion, right? The difference between consciousness and self-consciousness. A key theme that we've seen already in the previous paragraphs that is going to be worked out as a motif over and over again here. So he says, the shape of religion contains not the existence of spirit as nature that is free from thought, nor is a thought that is free from existence. So these are what we're not dealing with here, although these are interesting topics, right? The existence of spirit as a nature that's free from thought, a nature that's just out there that we could encounter, but ultimately is just, it's not really spirit, it's not really Geist, right? It's really the environment that we run into. Nor is a thought that is free from existence. So we don't want something that is just abstraction. We don't want something that is pure notion or mere notion, as we saw before. We don't want, to use the example I used a few paragraphs ago, a Wikipedia article in place of actual religious life and conviction and history. Instead, what do we have? He says, this is an existence, a Dasein, that is preserved, erhaltene, held on to, literally, in thought or in thinking, in denken, Gedanke, right? In what we do as human beings. We are the thinking creature. Not that other creatures don't think at all, but that's our sort of, that's one of our best features, right? Plenty of other animals probably think in even maybe complex things. They don't think in the way that we do, thinking about thinking, writing books, all that sort of stuff. So he goes on and he says, it's an existence that's preserved in thinking, and here Miller says, and also something thought that is objectively present to it. Now that objectively present to it, is it an okay translation? Yeah, it is. But it's not a good translation. Because what does Hegel actually say? He's playing off of Dasein, existence, and he says, das sich da ist, right? So the ist there is from the word to be, right? Sein, right? And da is the da in Dasein, right? So it itself is there. It is present to itself as something that's in front of it, or behind it, or has some sort of location that is there, that is standing out. So he says, it's in accordance with the specific character of this shape in which spirit knows itself. Now we have to move to another thing, right? The specific character of this shape correlates to a religion. Eine Religion, right? Not all religions, but a religion. And Hegel is going to play off of this, sort of generic or universal notion of religion as opposed to a particular religion a lot in this section. And he has to, because what are we doing in this entire portion of the work? We're going through religion after religion after religion, or type of religion after type of religion after type of religion, not religion as such. And that's what gives us the history of religions, and that's what also gives us the possibility of comparative religion that we're going to talk about here, and that's what also gives us the possibility of kind of an evolutionary development in consciousness of religions. So he goes on, and he says that it's in this accordance with the specific character of this shape in which spirit knows itself that one religion is distinguished from another. Verschiedenen, right? Divided off from. Distinguished works just as well. We have at the same time to note that the exposition, Darstellung, right? He's going to use the word Vorstellung, and we've also got Darstellung here, so that this putting in place, you could say making objective, placing something into existence as what is thought, what is understood, right? So this exposition of this knowledge of itself within the framework of this single, einzelnen, specific character, Bestimmtheit, right? Each character, each religion has its own, not just specific character, but single, individuated, einzelnen, specific character, specific determinacy, right? So this is an important development. When we're looking at an actual religion, spirit knows itself in that religion. And he says that, here we go, this knowledge of itself within the framework of this single specific character does not exhaust the totality of a given religion. He doesn't use the word Totalität there, he uses the word ganz, right? The whole, the core, the essence, the entirety of the religion. And here's where we should think about, well, what is a religion? This is going to be a bit of a digression, but this comes from years and years of teaching religious studies classes to undergraduates and of talking about religion quite a bit and doing a lot of research on this. There is no universally agreed upon definition of religion. You will never find any such, and anybody who prefers one to you is either uneducated, ill-informed, an ideologue, or trying to get something over on you. Instead, what we find is religion is an incredibly complex human phenomena which has historical dimensions, ritual dimensions, experiential dimensions, doctrinal dimensions. You notice if you're hearing this, it sounds a little bit like Ninian Smart's, dimensions of religion. Well, that's one way in which we can depict that to ourselves. There's all these different, as Hegel's going to call them, aspects, Seiten, sides, to any given religion. You can call them components if you want to. You can call them dimensions. And they're there. Anybody who says, oh, religion is just this, is full of crap. Because religion is never, ever, ever that simple. It may be that within the mind of the thinker who's rejecting it. It may be that in the mind of the person who has their own religion and wants to reject other people's religions. It may be that in the attitudes of isolated people who don't really know much about their religion. But when you talk about a religion as a totality, there's a lot of moving parts, right? It's a complex whole. And this is the case whether we're talking about huge world historical missionary religions like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, or whether we're talking about what people used to call primitive religions, now better termed indigenous religions, even those of relatively isolated tribes like the Naskapi way up in northern Canada. Complex. There's a lot of things going on there. So, coming back to this, right? Every religion is a totality, and he says that this Darstellung, this exposition, does not exhaust that totality. He says the series of different religions which will come to view just as much sets forth, again, only the different aspects of a single religion. Now, what the hell is he talking about there? The series of religions. Like, we're going to start with these religions and then move on to these, move on to these. There's obviously some arbitrariness to Hegel's presentation of this, as we're going to see with his dismissal of Eastern religions, or as Miller's translating it, Oriental, Morgenländisch religions, the religions of the lands of the morning, the East, right? There's some arbitrariness to this, but there's also a really key point that he's making here. The aspects that we can find in a given religion, we can generally find in other religions if we're adopting anything like a phenomenological attitude towards them, and not the attitude of the believer or polemicist who needs the religions already to be within a framework and argue against them, but the person who actually wants to know what their religions are like, who wants to know what's going on with them, who wants to see them as part of a way in which human beings understand themselves in relation to God, in relation to the cosmos, in relation to ethical life. So I'm going to skip over any sort of examples at this point, but we'll come back to that. So he says that, here we go, every single religion and the ideas which seem to distinguish one actual religion from another occur in each one, if we're actually paying attention. Then he says, at the same time, the difference must be viewed as a difference of religion. So how do the religions differ from each other? How can we arrange them not just on the same level as all developments of one single thing, just working it out in different ways, but with one higher and one lower, at least in the framework of spirit? He tells us that since spirit lives in the difference of its consciousness and its self-consciousness, the aim of the movement is to supersede this distinction and give the form of self-consciousness to the shape that is the object of consciousness. So this is a clue to what makes things the way they are in Hegel's views on religion, right? We want self-consciousness over consciousness, and then we want a reconciliation of the two of them. So he goes on and he says, this difference is not superseded just by the fact that these shapes have within them the moment of self, and God is thought of as self-consciousness. You can have that in all sorts of religions, whether it's a religion of light, a religion of plant and animal. You can have that already. He says, the self that is thought of is not the actual self. In order that the self, like any other more precise determination of shape, may in truth belong to this shape, it must, on the one hand, be posited in the shape by the act of self-consciousness, and on the other hand, the lower determination must show itself to be reduced to a moment of the higher and to be comprehended by it. So two important criteria here. There has to be a development of subjectivity of the self, and that is higher, and these determinations must be arranged in such a way that the higher determinations are superseding the lower determinations. They're putting them in a context, right? Rather than the lower predominating and the higher being muted or not fully developed or suppressed or repressed or whatever we're going to say. So he goes on and he says, here we go. The lower determination must show itself to be reduced to a moment of the higher, be comprehended by it. For what is thought of ceases to be something merely thought of, something alien to the self's knowledge, only when the self has produced it. So this is why the second main part of the religion section is going to be the religion of art. The object is its own, consequently beholds itself in the object. Through this activity, the lower determination has at the same time vanished. For the act is the negative that's realized at the expense of something else. But now, has it truly vanished? No, because he goes on to say, insofar as the lower determination is still present, it has retreated into an unessential aspect. So as we're moving on, getting past natural religion, the higher determinations are the ones, the higher sides, the higher aspects, are the ones that predominate, and the lower are they're just kind of there. They may have been part of its history, but they don't really matter that much. And so, we could think of some of the examples that he's going to use. Now, that's going to come about not in this section, but in the next section. He says, insofar as the lower determination is still present, right, it's retreated, just as on the other hand, where the lower is still dominant, but the higher is also present, the one determination devoid of self has its place alongside the other. So the lower could be dominant, and it will be dominant in some religions, and this is why they are developmentally behind Greek religion, for example. So he goes on and he gives an example that I think we can talk about, right? He says, accordingly, if the various ideas within a particular religion do exhibit the entire movement of its shapes, the character of each idea is determined by the particular unity of consciousness and self-consciousness in that religion. That is, by the fact that self-consciousness embraces within itself the determination of the object of consciousness. It has, by its act, it has appropriated it and knows it is the essential determination in the face of the other. So self-consciousness is always involved in every religion. It's a question of how this particular unity of consciousness and self-consciousness plays out. And so we've got spirit that's, living in the difference of consciousness and self-consciousness and sort of looking on to religion as the phenomenologist who is, taking in these different religions. And he goes a little bit further and he says, this is kind of a rich sentence. The truth of the belief in a determination of the religious spirit is revealed in the fact that the constitution of the actual spirit is similar to that of the shape in which spirit beholds itself in the religion. So we've got religious spirit, right? This sort of abstract thing, more universal, and the constitution of it there is similar to the shape in which spirit beholds itself in the religion. And then he says this, for example, the incarnation of God, the Menschenwerden, the becoming man, becoming human, which occurs in Oriental religion has no truth because the actual spirit of that religion is without this reconciliation. So you read that and you're like, what is he referring to there? I mean, first of all, what does Hegel actually know about religions outside of Europe? Not actually all that much. Enough to give him ideas, but not enough to give him a full comprehension of religious systems. Certainly not at the time that he's writing the Phenomenology. So what does he mean by the, how did Miller translate it? The incarnation of God. Okay, well maybe that's talking about avatars in Vaishnavite Hinduism. Or maybe that's thinking about the conception of God in Buddhism. Particularly in Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, where we've got bodhisattvas and we've got multiple Buddhas at different points in time, kind of similar to the Hindu concept of the avatar, right? Hegel's familiar with these things. I don't think that he actually understands them adequately to say things judiciously about them, but there is something really kind of interesting in this. He's using a word, reconciliation, Versöhnung. He hasn't used that at all in this paragraph. What's going on? Why is he bringing that up? There is no reconciliation, and therefore the incarnation that occurs in these religions has no truth. Does that mean that it's not an incarnation at all? No, truth means something different here, and reconciliation is part of this, how consciousness and self-consciousness are coming together for Hegel. He thinks that you just don't have that in there. I think that quite a few Buddhists and Hindus would probably disagree. He might also be talking about, the role of the immortals or the, celestial beings in Taoism. We're not clear about who he's referencing. Let's go on. He says, it's inappropriate here to return from the totality of determinations to the individual ones and to show in which shape within the totality in its particular religion the others are contained in their completeness. The higher form being placed under a lower lost its significance for self-consciousness, belongs to it only superficially, and to picture thought, Vorstellung, right? It's to be considered in its proper significance only where it's the principle of the particular religion and upheld by its spirit. So what do we have here? A whole bunch of different religions that are going to be studied in turn, beginning with natural religions that are oriented towards natural phenomena that are taking lower aspects as being more essential than higher aspects. Now, from their own point of view, these are not lower aspects. They think that they're seizing on what is truly essential, not for religions in general, because they don't care about that, but for our particular understanding of who we are and our relation to the divine within this particular society, framework, religion, right? And that's what's happening. Different aspects can be seized upon. So Hegel is going to be doing something that can, roughly fit within the rubric of comparative religion, but it's not comparative religion in the sense that we might take a class in it today, where we look across a whole bunch of religions and we're like, look at this feature and how it plays itself out. How does sacrifice of one's own body through mortification play itself out in, monastic Christianity, in the Lakota Sundance, in this phenomenon over here? How do these compare with each other? Hegel's not doing that. Hegel is saying, however, there are these aspects that are found in various religions. It's just a question of where the priority is being set. And we can only see higher and lower from the perspective of some vantage point. So Hegel is presuming this higher, lower, sort of thing from the vantage point of what's the ultimate religion for him? Revealed religion, and not just revealed religion, Christianity, and not just Christianity, but his interpretation of Christianity that many Christians would probably disagree with. But that's coming down the line. So this is preparing us to go into now these studies, very short studies, of what Hegel's calling natural religion and natural religions.